in your opinion, is more in the world possible or maybe
That's a very good question. Yeah, that's a perfect question. It's
a minute in every or always was. It is better over for today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anand. I'm very happy to be in your show. I've watched some of your other videos and I really like them.
I understand that you are in the field of AI management and network network for my purpose is going to be shared in simple what is AI.
That's an excellent question. AI basically, um, so AI is artificial intelligence. So anything that human beings can do, we are trying to teach AI to do. So AI is basically, it works on processing tons of data. So the more data you have, the more the better the training would be. And the training basically tries to find patterns and in the data and it tries to generalize the data, those patterns. For example, and we have tons of applications of AI. For example, Google Translate. You put something in English and you translate it, and Google Translate translates it to French. Or, for example, you go to Facebook and Facebook has this face recognition, right? So it first it looks at the data. The data is a picture in this example, and it tries to basically find where the heads of people are. And for each person, if that person is on Facebook, it basically tags that face. For example, there's a picture of, for example, me and Anand and some other people. So Facebook would say, okay, this is the picture of Anand, this is a picture of Fares, and so on and so forth. So this is another application of AI. And AI has applications in different fields. If the type of data that AI deals with is text and language, that's called NLP. That's one branch of AI, natural language processing. If the data, for example, is images or videos, then the application is called, like that branch of AI is called computer vision. So that's another branch. There's so many other branches, and one branch is basically robotics, and another branch deals with audio and voice and things like that. So anything that humans being can do, AI tries to basically mimic, do, and also sometimes even do better. Uh, for example, this software that Aaron and your brother Amit, they put together, I think this is a very good example of AI. So it basically transforms, audio waves to text. And yeah, that's another form of AI. But over the past few years, there are people also use AI to generate data. It's not only like they process the data and they understand something, they can generate data. It's called generative AI. So what it does is, for example, looks at all the, music that, for example, Mozart composed, right? It processes all that data and it basically produces music similar to in the same style as Mozart. Or for example, it basically processes all like different poetries of like let's say Iranian poets or other like Indian poets, and it tries to basically mimic their style and produce similar similar works. That's called basically generative AI. And Chat GPT and those types of AI, they fall in this category. They're all called generative AI.
Would you be our AI employer that you are involved in?
Sure, that's a good question. You know, in my uh, like I worked in for different companies, and some of the projects I worked on, I can tell you, some of them, for example, it was like initially I was involved in a project that detected fraud. For example, when people are using credit cards, can we tell if the credit card is stolen or not? So this is a very simple application of AI. It's called classification. So you have some data and you want to classify that data. Like given that data, you're trying to basically add a label to it. A simple example is, for example, spam detection. When you go to your Gmail, some of the emails are automatically go to spam. So that's an AI, like a very simple AI. So it processes it. So basically, the software processes the text and it says, is it spam or no spam? So this is something I worked on, was like fraud detection. I also worked on a bunch of basically recommendation systems. So when, for example, people are looking for jobs, can we recommend them good jobs? Like you log in, for example, to LinkedIn or to another platform, and based on your past history, we recommend you like jobs that you might be interested in future. So these are like recommendation systems. And also I worked on like some other projects that basically given, for example, a video or like some text, like these are basically educational video. Given this video, so what kind of things you're going to learn from this video? What are like the skills that you're going to master if you watch this video? So given like some raw text, can we infer what you're going to learn if you watch the video? So that's another kind of project I worked on. And I also worked on some, so this is from like back when I was at school. So I also worked on basically OCR system, optical character recognition. So like you scan like a handwritten text and you basically convert it to typed version. So it's as if like you have some handwritten text and you don't want to like someone to just type it, right? So you take a picture and the text is automatically transferred to basically the picture is automatically transferred to the text. And yeah, and the reason is that if it's converted to text, it's searchable, right? You can search it, and it also in terms of uh, space size, it's much smaller, right? So images are like much larger data than text. So that's another thing. So it's basically you're trying to teach the computer to understand like the images. So for example, this is the image of an A, this is an image of the B. And different people have different handwritings and styles, but the AI system should generalize enough that it can detect that this is A, this is B, or like if you put it together, this is the, for example, like image of the word book, for example.
Yeah.
So that's basically OCR system.
What are the current projects that you are working on?
That's a very good question. So currently, actually, I'm working on a couple of projects. So one of them, as I said, is recommendation system, but another one is basically search. So if people search for something, can we find like relevant documents and things? like that. So this is based on basically AI. So let's say if I'm searching for like a specific job, for example, I'm searching for, let's say, Python programming in the US or Python programming in Austin, Texas. So some jobs, or like, so that's a very simple query, but like if the query is more complex, how can we basically have to understand the query and look at all the jobs that are about that query, right? So that matching is also AI. So AI basically tries to understand semantics of the text. So that's one thing I'm currently working on. And I'm also working on extracting basically skills and attributes from text, from jobs. For example, you have a job description. What are the requirements of that job? What are the good skills to have? What are some skills you have to have? Things like that.
in your opinion, is more in the world policy of the
That's a very good question. Yeah, that's a perfect question. It's very interesting that AI, AI is basically a tool that could be used like in a positive way or a negative way. And there are a lot of like positive usage of AI. For example, trying to finding jobs for people. So that's a positive aspect of it. So I try to stay in that field. Uh, there are other fields, for example, AI can be used in medicine or in pharmaceutical companies.
yeah,
And I give you an example. There was this there's this website Kaggle, and they have this competition. So they upload some data and they ask you for a task. So one of the tasks was, there's so images of the eye, like from
yeah,
close images of the eye, of the I think pupil of the eye. And the task is, by looking at the image, you have to decide if that person has diabetes or not,
yeah,
right? And you don't have to be a doctor. You have a lot of examples, like images. Some of them have diabetes, some of them don't have. Like you have, let's say you have hundreds of thousands of these images. And the competition was you can use any method, any AI method, and you should basically create a detector. And at the end of the day, like the person who won the competition, who basically ranked higher. So usually you split your data into, let's say, 80% training data, you build your model, and then you test your data on the remaining. Sorry, you test your model on the remaining data, let's say the 20% that you haven't looked at. So the person who built the best model, basically, I think his accuracy was very high, and it was even higher than doctors. Uh, but he was not the doctor himself, right? So if you give the picture to a doctor, he says yes or no, he looks at the picture. But this person, basically, not being a doctor, just being like a computer scientist or a programmer, using the data that he had, he could find rules and patterns that worked better than doctors. So
yeah,
that's another example I can give you.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but at the same time, AI basically is a tool. The same way, for example, the internet is also a tool. It can be used in a positive or negative way. Like many people use the internet to promote hatred, disinformation,
yeah,
misinformation, things like that. But other people use it in a more positive way.
yeah,
So the same way, I think AI can be used, and this tells us that like uh, morality, ethics is very important. First, it should be regulated, but at the same time, like people like from childhood and from a very young age should be educated, should have a moral education or moral compass that can to use like to make decisions when using AI, basically.
yeah. We know if 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 big many big problem
Mm.
in your opinion, big problem or type of problem should be. 台湾
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think AI could be used in many different, as you said, many different like to solve many different
Yeah,
problems. But I think, one thing is, I believe that like a lot of these problems should be solved in a kind of like a global fashion,
yeah,
because, a lot of these problems are not at a global level. For example, I think global warming, for example, is a is
yeah,
a is a,
yeah,
is a big problem, or preservation of the environment. So that's another problem. Or the other one is basically weaponization. Countries are basically in competition uh, to create more weapons. All of this like that would lead to wars and conflicts. So I think these are like some of the major problems that humanity is facing with. But another problem I think is discrimination. Uh, Not everyone have equal access to, for example, means of education or
yeah,
financial means, things like that. So you see a lot of disparity between the poor and the rich and the uneducated and educated. So this discrimination, I think, exists. And I think one way to fight that is basically making AI accessible to all. Basically, democratizing AI. Because you can use generative AI to create knowledge. It's a source of knowledge, right? So you're basically trying to trying to help people do their jobs much faster and more efficiently. At the same time, you're providing them knowledge. Rather than, for example, if the internet is also the same. You can is a source of knowledge, but you have to search and you have to look at different sources and make some judgments. But with AI, you can just type your question and get your answer immediately. So it's more readily available to
yeah,
you. It's the same way, I think, when the printing technology came to being, printing press by Gutenberg. Before that knowledge, books were only available to the rich. It was only like a
yeah, yeah,
elite, elite of society had access to knowledge. But printing basically made it accessible to all. So it solved a lot of problems. I think the same way, AI is going to help people, but uh, it shouldn't be monopolized. Some companies like saying, okay, we have the AI, you have to pay to use it. I think if it's monopolized, like that's not the solution. Now many companies actually they're producing these large language models. And these models try to mimic what ChatGPT is doing, right? But the good thing is these are open source models. So anyone can take the model, download it, fine tune it, customize it, and use it for their own use cases. So I think that's the right way to go. But this was an excellent question, I think.
what are the possibilities to solve the problem with limited through AI?
Right. That's a very good question. I think, for example, let's say for global warming, you have so one way is you have to basically try to see like what are the contributors, like what are the main contributors to global warming, right? So if you have a lot of data, for example, a lot of images from the space, or I mean like Google Earth images, you can basically give them to AI, and you can understand like what is contributing to global warming. Is it, for example, this problem or that problem? I think detecting where the problem is one way to go. Uh, but sometimes you have like multiple solutions to the problem, and you can simulate those solutions using AI, right? So, for example, you're saying, what if I plant like these many trees in these locations? So what kind of tree I should plant here? So that's one question. How many trees should I plant? If I plant these trees, is it gonna disrupt the ecosystem of that region or not? So all of this, can be, and it takes time. Like, say, let's say if you plant these trees and you wait, for example, 10 years and see what happens, right? Uh, but instead of doing that, you can simulate that using AI, right? So you can run simulation, and these simulations run very fast.
in your life, what happened are going on in the field of AI.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent question. I think one thing is, so, like I think researchers are trying to basically make AI, so the ultimate intelligence, right? So the AI does everything for you. So nowadays, there's some human involvement in the picture, but I think the ultimate goal is that. But I think there's some discoveries that are happening now. So one of them, I think a lot of investment is being done on generative AI, and usually these are like chatbots, right? So you basically ask a question and you get the answer back, or you ask a question and you say like, write an email for me with these, you know, characteristics, things like, and it does it for you. So these are like basically sentence completion or basically chatbots. Some of these models, they have billions of, or sometimes even more than 1 trillion parameters, right? So to basically and you have this data, let's say you have this chatbot and it's very generic. So now the question is, can you make it more specific? Like, can you create a specialist out of this box? So the specialist, what it does is, for example, let's say you want to make, for example, an optometrist chatbot, a chatbot that is an expert in optometry. It's kind of like a doctor, right? So you ask any question about optometry and it answers you. So what you do is you take that chatbot and you further, the terminology is fine tune, or you customize it, right? So you basically customize the chatbot using a lot of examples from doctors. And these examples, yeah, you give it these examples, but the problem is you have to go and change all those billions of parameters or like trillions of parameters. So sometimes, you don't need to change all those parameters. Maybe some subset of those would be good enough. Or, yeah, so some research is being done by that. Like, how can you fine tune these models better using like less computation and faster fine tuning customizing? So this way, there are a lot of like open source models like different companies are creating. You take these open source models and you fine tune them, but you need some computational power to do the fine tuning. But if you can find a way to just maybe fine tune a subset of those parameters, that would be very good. There have been some discoveries and suggestions in that field. I think that's one way to go. The other one is, I think, so chatbot is one, but also, chatbots now can, for example, ChatGPT 4.0 can also work with audio or with basically video, things like that. It can also create audios or videos for that. You describe a scenario and you say, can you create a movie for me with this scenario? And it does it for you very quickly. There's some software that do that. So that's another line of, I think, discovery.
In, here, there has been a boom in the advancement of AI. For example, in healthcare, climate is poverty, hunger, etc. How good do you be for years to in the area through AI?
I think that's a very good question. It's an excellent question. So one thing is, I think because AI can help people do the jobs, I think the ideal case would be, I always think about it this way, that like people can, for example, do the same job that they did like in 8 hours, they can do it in 1 hour using AI. If they can do that like in 1 hour, instead of working the whole day, they just work on 1 hour. And then the rest could be like they can do it in volunteer works, they helping each other and things like that. So people should be able to work fewer hours, but do more voluntary work for other people or for other causes, like for good causes. I think that would be an ideal situation. But that requires that there are some regulations, like global regulations on AI. So AI is not monopolized by some companies. And if it's accessible to all, it can reduce work hours. I think that's one way to go. And what it requires, I think, solutions at a global level, because some countries, like some more countries with like more advancement in technologies, can monopolize the technology and use it for their own advantages or for their own political gains and advantages, and try to subordinate other countries, things like that. But if it's regularized and everyone has access to it, yeah, I think it can definitely help in many areas. It could definitely, for example, reduce labor. For example, in culture, it can definitely reduce labor, and that could help a lot with, I think, the hunger problem that you mentioned, and things like that.
You believe this only job and you know able to
That's a very good question. I think, um, I think eventually AI would take basically would replace like all jobs.